We're going to be discussing a model that is extremely unique. And as you know, with the Cyber SN brand, we're extremely committed to bringing product services and now financial models to our community that bring value to the individual and find a way to relieve stress and and work gone wrong, if you will. So it's my pleasure to introduce Ron Kornfeld to this conversation, the founder and CEO of XLIO. Ron, good to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I hope I am a stress reliever.
You are. Well, I'll tell you, it was, I knew it instantly, and we'll get into it. There's so many value adds to what your model does. But when I first heard your model, the first thing that came to my mind is how many mergers and acquisitions go wrong. And as somebody that came up through sales, I know that usually those impacts are, beyond just product. It's sales, it's marketing, it's a lot of disruption, a lot of problems, a lot of challenges. So that's just one value add you got. So let's get into it. Let's first start off with, how did you come up with this brilliant model? How did it happen?
How did this all come together? So we are focused on a part of the M&A value problem that you identified, which is small company acquisitions and acquihires. And so my background is half a dozen startups, six startups, three of which ended up being small company acquired, acquihired, and then ultimately ending up at Amazon running corporate and business development for some strategic teams around the world. And a large part of the diet of big company corporate and business development is really around small company acquisitions. Um, there's the big ticket acquisitions, and you're right, a lot of those don't go well. But in those cases, you're getting customer bases, you're getting brands, you're buying market share maybe before your competitors can get it. And there's some logic to those deals. A lot of times they drive up the stock price and pay for the deal. So I guess from an ROI standpoint, they actually work out. But small company acquisitions and acquihires are a completely different kind of experience. And so not only my own personal experiences in starting these companies, but also as an acquirer, showed exactly what you said, which was there wasn't value being created. There was actually value being destroyed for all the participants. And taking a page out of the Amazon book, which is working backwards, it struck me that that's really kind of odd, because why does a big company even do an acquihire? I mean, why would you even think about buying a small company? It's to plug a hole in a product line. It's for competitive response. It's because your own engineers had a goal they weren't able to achieve or only able to partially achieve. And so you would think you should be able to go out and buy something that plugged right in, right? And what we found is that almost never worked. The buyers didn't get the technology they needed. The sellers, other than perhaps the venture capital funds that were behind these companies, and some of the founders, but not always the founders, did okay. And everybody else did not have such a great experience. So working backwards was the idea. What could we do to optimize this, to create value so we could deliver exactly what a company wanted and take care of the people who work there? And that's really the idea behind the made to order startup.
I love it. I love it. I mean, that's the way a lot of problems get solved, is those of us that are in the game, seeing how it doesn't work the way that it could work if we had a different mindset about success, and seeing failures is the only way. So I love that. Saw tons of failures. You're like, I'm going to solve this. All right. So now tell us, because this is, and all of you that are with us, by the way, we're going to uh, take questions as we go, maybe more
Sure.
towards the end, what have you, but put them in chat because it helps me just decide when I know what I want to talk about. I've known Ron now for a couple of years, and we've had a successful project together. So I know where I want to go, but I want to see your questions, and I might weave them in. So feel free to do that. So Ron, tell us this model, how it works.
Okay, sure. So let me drill down a little bit more on the problem space, and then
Yeah.
I'll say how
Okay.
we've addressed
Perfect.
that. So when I make the bold statement that these things almost never work, the root cause of that is essentially that when a couple of folks get together to start a company, uh, they usually have a bold vision. They need to have a bold vision in order to get funded, um, and they and in order to acquire talent. Uh, so they take this bold vision, and part of that includes a set of predicted financial outcomes. It's why investors invest, right? Because they're looking for upside. So they basically build a company that's capitalized around being fairly successful financially. And more recently, we've seen many companies just believe they're going to be unicorns. So they start to think about this as a $1 billion acquisition, which results in a couple of things. Valuations can be greatly inflated,
Mhm.
and stock awards to key employees are greatly reduced. And so, in good faith, they go to employees and they say, hey, look, if I give you a sub 1% grant in this company, you're going to do just fine because we're going to sell it for $1 billion and be fabulously wealthy. Um, so when an acquihire comes around and they're selling the company for 50 million or 75 million, the venture capital firms get their money back because they've got those preferences baked into the way they invested. Some of the founders, the original founders, probably have founders shares that protect them in large part, and everybody else gets washed out, which means the buyer has to come up with more money in order to keep those people around. And the final stage of most acquisitions, even big company acquisitions, is figuring out who's going to pay to keep the employees around. Um, Unless, in fact, it really is a billion plus acquisition that everybody's taken care of. So, from a financial modeling standpoint, you have that problem. From a technology standpoint, you have a related set of problems, which it would be very difficult for me to start a company and say, I'm going to build this company that's going to solve one problem for one buyer. I
Right.
have to solve a problem either directly for the marketplace or make a case I'm selling it to an oligopoly, and this will plug into the entire oligopoly. Uh, there are exceptions, right, where some things might work that way, but generally not, right? So, from a technological standpoint, unless I just happen to coincidentally come up with something that plugs right into the technology infrastructure of a prospective buyer, most of that code's not particularly useful. So, I have a capitalization problem, I have a technology problem, and I usually also have a team problem in that I've been building a full business. So, I have marketing people, I have business development people, I have HR people, I have administrative people. And so, there's a lot of people that the buyer may not even need.
Yeah.
And as an overlay to all of this, the buyer, because they're buying an existing property, a company which has made promises to its employees, either implicit or explicit, um, has to deal with the buyer might want everybody to come into the office, and the buyer might be located in a place that people don't necessarily want to live. The buyer may want to reorganize the division so it's scattered hither and yon across their entire corporate infrastructure. And there's a lot of different variables there. And so, again, they can end up losing people in a transaction, even if they could take care of them or were willing to take care of them financially, in that people don't want to move. They took a job because it was virtual. Now it's not virtual anymore. They took a job because it wasn't in a particular location, and now it's going to be virtual or however that works. So the way we solve that with a made to order startup is we start with the purchaser. We start with the company which is trying to solve the technology problem, build a product pipeline issue, meet the needs of the marketplace, competitive response, something that may have come out of user groups or focus groups they're not able to address themselves. And we develop a specification with that buyer. Once we have that specification in a raw form, we start to assemble a team around that to of employees, prospective employees, to refine that specification. And only after the buyer signs an acquisition agreement, we build a company that's completely bespoke, completely made to suit to their needs, and they can be the only buyer of it. So the reason that that works for everybody is they get exactly what they need, the buyer does, because they help design it. We can give a very fair deal to employees because, first of all, we can share the entire cap table with them. There's no surprises, there's no down rounds, there's no financing events they may not be preparing for. It's all there, very easily accessible, which means their profit interest unit grants or RSU grants are very straightforward and very predictable as far as their value goes and tied to their own performance. And it's only engineers and scientists and product managers and people related to delivery. The startups don't have administrative staff. We provide all of that out of XLIO. They don't have to deal with those things themselves, and so they don't have all these other people sharing the upside. So they're building a piece of technology the buyer needs. They're motivated in a fair way so that the people actually doing the work end up with the gains, which is an unusual model in venture capital. So how does it work for the investors? Because we're only funding deals once we have a purchase agreement, we offer our investors a better return than most venture capital firms do, but we do that without taking it out of the employees. We do it in a fair and equitable way with the employees, but also without creating unnaturally high prices for the buyers. Because you're not paying market rates. You're paying the cost of building the company plus treating the employees fairly. And as a consequence, it becomes a very attractive alternative to really any other way of doing this, unless big company can do it on their own, then they should.
Right, right. I mean, how incredible, right, everybody? Okay, so I'm gonna say this in less, a little bit less words of what's going on here, right? We've had years of failures. I mean, I'm 25 years into this, and I remember OEM deals not be even being able to work out, which are the sometimes the first step before the smaller company acquisition, right, Ron? And
Yeah.
like that never those didn't work. The technology could not come together. And then, of course, we've all know the stories where the cap table gets wiped out, and most of the people who created things got nothing, and so that's also a failure. And then, to your point, when an acquisition or a merger does happen, there's always this disruption with talent that is not good for either the talent or the employer. And so, like, oh my gosh, this is what we've been living in for the last 20 something years or what have you. And now what you're doing is it's a company. The employer, if we want to call them that, the organization, they buy an organization. There is an acquisition, and that acquisition is planned. And the plan starts with, what do you need as a product? And you build the vision and the design and everything together, and you, XLIO, hire the staff for that company. They'll be employees of that organization that's going to be acquired. And I know that's where we came into this story, and it's such a wonderful story to sell. And those people have equity. They know what their equity value is and what it will be, because it's all ironed out. I mean, how amazing is that, everybody? Like, there's no, what could it be? Wonder what it will be. Will we make as much as we thought, or this or that? Like, I love, and that's where for me, it's empowering these incredible developers, product people, data people that tend to in most cases not get the kind of money they're either promised, thought they would, and the gig's up. Like, everybody knows now. So thank gosh you're doing this, Ron. I mean, at least the generations that have been through it. And so that's what we're talking about, everybody. And this last piece that you just started to talk about, Ron, like the acquirer, that's what we're going to call them, not an employer. The acquirer actually doesn't put any financial skin in the game up front. Listen to that, everybody. That's incredible. I mean, that's why I'm like, there's so much value. There's so many different angles here. Um, speak to that for us too, Ron, and how it benefits an organization, particularly today in these economic climates. And of course, the concept makes sense as how it would benefit. But give us some more, since you've got such a financial background.
Well, I mean, there's a couple of aspects. I mean, the first one is obviously we've been talking about the product, right? It's going to, a priori, the product is going to work and fit within the infrastructure of the buyer because they help specify it. The second thing is that a lot of buyers are not able to acquire the best talent because their compensation plans aren't really structured around acquiring talent in the high tech space or real innovators.
Mm.
And the reason they do that is because if you're a fairly big company, as Jeff Bezos used to say, at least not in public, but he used to say, not everybody can be a general. We need lots of people who are very happy being corporals. And so most corporate compensation plans are really designed around finding people who are okay with a modicum of success, right? But people who actually want to make some decent money and be rewarded for their insights and their unique contribution as inventors. You want to have a couple of those people wandering around as distinguished engineers or whatever in a big company, but it's very hard to build a culture around that. And so compensation plans aren't engineered for that. We're able to deliver that kind of value because we can create this economic model that creates the value with the employees. And so they get a different kind of employee. And then the third thing is just from a pricing standpoint, because we price our companies based on essentially the cost of capital and the cost of giving the employees the outcome that they want, and not based on some sort of market characteristics. Um, we're able to price these companies much more competitively, if you could use that term, versus companies they might be able to buy if they just called up an investment banker and said, go out and find me some companies. Because when an investment banker goes out and finds companies, you have to pay for infrastructure, you have to pay for a customer base, you have to pay for goodwill, which is where they kind of shovel all the other value that they can't find some other way to describe into the deal. And in our case, I won't say it's cost plus, but it's essentially designed around as long as everybody gets treated fairly, that's the price.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And I'm sure that's what people want to, as I'm seeing here in the questions, even go a little bit deeper in. So, what do we got here? We've got
Yeah,
Mike.
let's answer some
Yeah.
questions.
What
Um,
happens when the acquirer refuses to acquire?
well, let's do the risk one first, and we'll come back to that one.
Okay. Okay.
So, seems like there must
I
still be
think
some
they're the
risk in the
same.
system.
Do you think
Well,
they're the
they
same?
are, but they're related. Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
so there is risk in the system. The risk is we can't deliver. And as we which is some things don't work. That's the nature of life. And the way we structure these deals, the acquirer pays nothing until they accept the company. So the acquirer isn't taking the risk, we're taking the risk. And in exchange for that risk, our investors are getting a return. So it's not a risk-free model. And our employees, of course, are also taking a risk because they're coming to work. We pay industry fair salaries, but they're taking the risk that it won't work uh, as a result of their efforts. Um, so it is not a risk-free model at all, but it is managed risk, and maybe more importantly, the risk is allocated and rewarded correctly.
Right.
We're not seeing transactions where the people who took no risk other than writing a check are getting most of the money, and that is philosophically very important to me. The way it relates to the second question is what happens when the acquirer refuses to acquire? They can't refuse to acquire if we deliver the company as specified. We do with certain acquirers, as we're negotiating these things, come up with various off ramps um, where they do pay. Because we are creating IP that they do not want in the open market because it is based on their specification, on their technology infrastructure. Um, but there's really not a scenario where an acquirer can refuse to acquire a company that they have contracted to purchase.
Right, right. And, on the risk side of things, considering what we just said about all these years of failures, I mean, what is the percentage, Ron? Do you have it off the top of your head of the percentage of mergers and acquisitions that failed technically? Do you
Oh,
know?
probably almost all of them, right?
I mean,
And I don't say that to just out of boosterism around our model or just out of hubris. Technologically, um, what you're getting at best in a small company acquisition is a group of entrepreneurs who've been thinking about your problem
mm,
for a while,
mm,
um, if you can keep them.
mm,
But as I said, I mean, a standard part of any acquisition, but particularly small company acquisition, is to try and figure out how to keep the people.
yeah,
Um, and most of the time, that doesn't work out particularly well because somebody's going to pay for it, right? The investors aren't going to pay for it. The founders don't want to pay for it, and the buyer doesn't want to pay for it. And so there's a little bit of movement, and whatever the employees were promised when they first joined the company, probably isn't what's going to happen. And because of this, the geographic um, uh, issues where and return to work kind of issues where people may not be comfortable with that. And then frankly, also there's certain companies people don't want to work for,
Yeah.
either because they've worked for them before or because they've heard things or whatever. And just your luck, that just happens to be your company's acquirer. You're not on the board. I mean, you're a software
Yeah.
developer. Nobody asked you whether you could do the transaction or not. And next thing
Yeah.
you know, your offer is with the XYZ company who you don't want to work for a variety of different reasons. So regardless of the financial model, you're not going to participate. So it's a gradation. I mean, you can look at the big deals that have taken place, and you can wonder whether some of them ever worked, right? And you can look in a variety of different categories, and it's really hard to tell what works and what doesn't work. Um, and what might show up later is a particular piece of value. But you can certainly say with small company acquisitions and acquihires that the vast majority of them don't work, except for the hire part, right? They can become very expensive recruitment exercises. Um,
Yeah.
and I suppose if you're a large company and you spend $50 million to get 10 really smart people, that's not the end of the world, but it's still
Right.
not necessarily the problem you were trying to solve.
It's not the product. The
Yeah,
product's not done.
right. You were trying to buy time and you didn't get that. You got
Right.
smart people.
Isn't it fascinating? I mean, to me, when I think about the risk, and I know when we first met and talked about doing business with Cypress and bringing you talent to fulfill this, I remember saying to you, well, first of all, what a great story to sell to talent, totally, fun for our team. But second of all, the only risk is getting the, sort of the product, what's done look like, and then the folks to deliver that. Whereas the risks on what way we've been doing this before is a long laundry list of already the risk is there in the product side of things and the people side of things, and nobody gets people right really. So I remember saying to you like, oh, we're gonna get the people right, and we did, and we
Which
do.
you have. Yeah.
And we do, and we are,
Yeah.
and I love that because it is about the people. So to me, the risk is all, so minimal compared to what's going on out in the world, that it's really exciting to see that it could be win-win in that we can get things done, for in business, and people can be taken care of. Um, and and really, also organizations can get to things that, maybe that financially right this moment they can't get to. I mean, I'm sure there's a big piece of that too in your model, right, Ron? Like,
Yeah. Well, there's a certain amount of financial engineering that goes into these as well, where we have a relationship with Baker Tilly for technical accounting services to help the public companies we work with um, uh, address the reporting uh, and P&L implications of this, and they're really favorable. They essentially can allow, this is obviously not accounting advice, but they can allow a company to spend future dollars on solving problems starting today,
mm,
which otherwise they might have to do out of their expense budgets, and expense ratios are always being examined in public companies. So it's really kind of some value there. The other thing is they get a running start with entrepreneurs. They get a
yeah,
fresh bunch of people who are super excited about working on something that has a fairly short-term fuse. Um, we get really great people to focus on the problem with enough latitude where we can continue to refine the spec with our buyers. So unlike a time and materials kind of consulting project where you can make as many changes as you want, but everything always ends up costing more, in this case, because we have entrepreneurs working on it, they can pivot like any other entrepreneur as we figure things out.
yeah, yeah. I love it. Love that. So let's look here. We got a question. You want to read it and
Yeah. So does Acquire commit to being a design partner? How closely do they follow development? So uh, most companies that we talk to or work with want to be part of the design process. Um, Sometimes because they want to be uh, inculcated with the entrepreneurial spirit, sometimes because they haven't written this stuff down and they're the only people who know what's going on, which is probably a more common case. Um, uh, it's mission critical for them in many cases, and so they want to keep their eyes on it. Um, so I would say they follow development pretty closely, weekly stand-ups and a lot of interaction. The um, and the reason we've engaged Baker Tilly as our partner in helping with this, there are some accounting principles around control that companies have different barriers into which they want to get involved with. They're all solvable, we found with Baker Tilly, but there may be some things that a company would want to do as far as participating as a partner, a capital P partner, that they may not be able to do just from a balance sheet and disclosure standpoint. Um, um, how many companies have gotten started with this model? It's all in stealth mode, um, and the reason for that is primarily because um, again, as public companies and the way they want to disclose this to the market, they have to be very careful. Secondarily, they're also very careful about how they disclose it to their own employees, because you can imagine if you're, the director of software development for the XYZ company, and now your boss is now working with an external party to build a startup, you might ask the question, why wasn't I invited to that party? Um, so these things are usually kept very close to the vest, um, and for totally understandable reasons. Um, but ultimately, how these things are rolled out and how they're discussed with the market is a decision that the buyer makes, which is another thing that they very much like about the model, because that's not something you can typically do with a public company acquisition.
I
Yeah.
was just hoping to see like, oh, we've done this, we've got 3 companies in process, or we've got 4 companies in process. We're just kind of looking for a number, but
How much?
Sure.
interesting.
So we have companies in process. We have companies in process, I guess, is the answer I would give you.
Yeah. Yeah, and who knows if it'll ever be announced one day. I have no idea what I haven't thought about that myself too. I would imagine maybe down the road, but this is definitely not, it's close to the best, like you said. And I certainly know that you've got some in play. So so let's talk about, sort of the design piece, because I'm glad that that came up. I mean, isn't that where it usually goes wrong anyways? I mean, how awesome that you guys are talking every week. I wouldn't want to do it if I didn't have a lot of engagement with, the buyer. It's like it's got to be a big piece of, it's a relationship. This isn't like get the
Oh yeah,
content
yeah.
done and you go away. I mean, you've got lots of communication, interaction, product strategy, conversations, right? There's a lot of that.
Oh yeah, and um, we insist on having good access to customers so that we can and we have we have product managers engaged in this because we want to build a good product, which means actually talking to real live customers. It's interesting, the specification itself, it's one of the big learnings I had. So I came out of nearly a decade at Amazon, which does an exceptional job of documenting their product requirements through a process you can Google, which is called the PRFAQ process, um, and which I won't bore you with the philosophy around that, but it's really good. And so you theoretically could give that document and those related documents to XLIO, and we're not working with Amazon, but you could give those to XLIO, and we could go and build a product based on that. Most companies do not have that clearer vision. And the reason they don't have that clear vision is no fault of their own. It's that it's really difficult to assign the dollars and resources to be that speculative about what the market would want, and also to have the financial backing that Amazon has to get it wrong, right? So most of us run our businesses much more carefully, more frugally than that. But as a consequence of that, we may not have the resources to build a specification so that when we call on that business and say, hey, tell us what you want and we'll go and build it, they don't just reach into their drawer and pull out this thing and say, we've been waiting for you. I'm glad for that. You called. And so we've learned to make the specification process a highly interactive one, where we essentially almost as a service figure out what it is we're going to build, but that specification actually goes into the contract. So an overly simplistic way of thinking about this is that our purchase agreements are like any other purchase agreement, but the effective date isn't the date it's signed, it's the date that the specification is met. And so the specification is the exhibit A of the agreement, and by mutual agreement can be updated or whatever, but is the trigger for the acquisition. But it is something that has to be created between the parties. And then, like we're talking about with stand-ups, it has to be managed as the business changes, as the competitive landscape changes, as customers start to provide information. And we're more than happy to do that, because as long as it means we don't need to hire more people or change the time frame in which those people would be working for the startup that we've built, we're fine making that change, because we're entrepreneurs. It's not a time and materials kind of deal.
Yeah, I love it. I'm going to go look up the PRFAQ myself. I'm very interested in hearing. I mean, as a software company ourselves, it's always the challenge of everybody's operational. How do we have time for building out, the vision and specking it so that we can get dates and really understand? It's a constant battle. It's a constant battle. I think it's just another reason why the offering is so special, is that it really starts with the specs, not
Yeah,
we built this because we thought you'd want it one day, and we're building it for you, with you, and in product, that's the only place it really goes wrong is the what done looks like, who says what done
right.
looks like, how do we know that we're building what the buyer wants. And so it comes with that in its model. It comes with that relationship, I would imagine, even with being close to the best, it's still going to come with that model. So I love that. And I can't wait to see this document. Amazon has wonderful models in general.
Well, there we go.
Right? Oh, there it
Thanks,
is.
Todd, for posting
Somebody
that.
added it. Thanks, Todd. Can't wait to check this out. Can't wait to check this
And
out.
by the way, if you ever want to schedule me getting up on a soapbox and preaching about the beauty of the PR FAQ process, I'm more than happy to do that. I'm thoroughly indoctrinated in that.
Yeah.
It really does work.
I mean, I'm indoctrinated in making and managing measurable agreements. I was trained
Yeah.
on that young. That was the game. That's how everything's done. And what is specs than measurable agreements? So, yeah, I would love to geek out on that, because I think it applies across all business units. It's not just to build a product, right?
Yeah. Well, um, what's relevant in a sense is that uh, most companies want to build products on time, right? I mean, and the product executives and the the CIOs, CSOs of the world want to hit their dates.
Mm.
The issue really is what done is, right? What is it?
Yes.
What are we delivering when, and why would anybody ever buy it? Are questions that kind of move around as that date approaches, and even the date can be somewhat malleable. So one of the advantages with working with any external partner, regardless of business arrangement, is you can hold them to dates, right? That's why a lot of people use consulting firms. But the challenge with a consulting firm is, first of all, that whole time and materials and change issue. And the second one is you don't get the smart people. You get a
Right.
body of code. And you may get some people, but they're not going to give you their best on a permanent employee basis, because, as you know, really good people are hard to hire and hard to retain. So, uh, but
Yeah.
they're but the value of figuring out what done looks like, where value is created, and then kind of adjusting that over time is something that it's profoundly important to any business, and they know that, right? It's just there's not really a great resource to get that.
Exactly. Exactly. So well said. So well said. Todd, you've got a question?
More a comment, but requirements are so important. You see this all the time in cybersecurity, Deidre.
Mm.
It's, oh, I just saw this great product pitch. I want to buy this product. And it's like, does it really fit your requirements? Does it really do what I need it to do? I don't know how we got so far into, 25 or 30 years of cybersecurity where we buy products because they look cool, not because we identified requirements that we need the product to meet.
Yeah, I mean, it's
So
been
I,
outside of cybersecurity too. And by the way, XLIO does products outside of cybersecurity too. But yeah, this is the challenge of business in
yes,
general. It's literally, what does done look like? How do we know we've achieved something? How do we know each person's contribution to whatever we did or did not achieve? I mean, these are the pieces that are supposed to be sort of the survival of the fittest is owning that, right? Like automation and AI is taking away repetitive things, and the rest it's strategic, it's people management, it's models for getting shit done. That the brain is going to win on over AI, and so yeah, it stinks we've been getting this wrong for so long, and most of it is born of the financial market, right? I mean, that's the system works that way. It's how it was built, whether it was intentional or not.
Well, as long as there's money flowing around, it's easy to get
Yeah.
it wrong. But what it doesn't do, it can make money for investors. It can boost stock prices. Some of the employees of some of the companies that are being acquired can make some money, but it can't delight customers. It can't solve real problems unless, by coincidence or even by plan that it does. But you're right, most of the time, there's a lot of poking around in the dark, and just the existence of a funded company, which has a product, doesn't necessarily mean they have something that solves a real world issue, because there's so much money that needs to be put to work.
Well, and that's where the risk is for the product leaders and the developers and the data scientists. If the sales doesn't work and the marketing doesn't work, then they don't make the money that they thought they were going to make on their options. I mean, that's as somebody that came up through sales, I used to always think about like if I and being the VP of sales in very important product companies, if I don't bring in this money, these are people's paychecks, but it's also their stock options that they're banking on, not just me and my stock options.
Right.
I used to think about that all the time. And so when the sales isn't there to make a transaction even happen or make it happen, but at much less money than anticipated, it's those people and others that make nothing. And so that risk is gone for those people unless
Yeah.
they don't build, which I mean, probably not going to happen
Right. And
comparatively.
and and you're in the people business, but one of the insights, or not, I won't say insights. One of the things that's so different about our model is all well, and it shouldn't be different, but all we're doing is recognizing is that the smart people doing the work are the most important part of this.
Sure.
Um, that then frames the ability to deliver. Um, we've at XLIO come up with a model to make it work for investors so that this can really happen, so buyers can really buy a company and those kinds of things. But it's based on equitably treating the people who work there, so they'll become happy employees of the acquirer and continue to add value into the future and end up being the next generation of leaders in those companies who really are trying to buy something more than technology. We were talking a while back to a company that is a very old insurance company,
Mhm.
um, and they originally talked to us about essentially a technical problem, which is that most of the data they were using for actuarial purposes was in paper format or in PDFs, which, as you know, aren't particularly well structured for any kind of data modeling. But as we got farther and farther into the discussions, it became readily apparent that what they were just looking for is people to shock the system. They had
Oh,
people who could be retrained. They just needed a team of people to shock the system into thinking entrepreneurially. And I believe they called the project Shockwave, because the idea was literally to defibrillate this fairly old company, because nobody knows insurance better than they do, right? And nobody knows the actuarial stuff. And they had some great data modeling people, and they solved some pretty gnarly IT problems associated with all this archaic data. But what they didn't have is people who were thinking like entrepreneurs.
yeah.
And that is one of the benefits that buyers get. And the specification process is sort of a way to distill that problem and solution in one place, because now you've got people, you get your best forward-thinking employees together to help formulate this specification that, to the question a few minutes ago, if we do it, you got to buy it. So there's money on the table that this better be right, and that in and of itself becomes a clarifying exercise to a lot of our buyers.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I really can't find any risk that is, I mean, when you've got almost 100% risk on the other side, to even suggest that there's a 10% chance, like, who cares? Like, it's not even it shouldn't even be a part of the conversation. We are failing at this stuff, and individuals don't have control over their income when it comes to stock in the way that you're giving it to them. And I just think it's awesome. And I'm really excited to continue to watch the work that you all do. And I'm wanting to see what you want to wrap up on and see if there's anybody here who've got some more questions. But we've got 5 minutes. Anybody want to chime in before I start to ask some wrapping questions? All right, well then I will. One of the things you mentioned earlier, just you've learned some lessons already, and that's the best part of everything that we do. Any other stories to share? That lessons don't have to be bad either, like
Yeah.
just early results, conversations where people are just feeling like, wow, this is happening from a client perspective, or any stories to share, since it's just a new thing that people are getting their heads around. Any stories to share?
Yeah, well, I've already alluded to two of them, but I'll share some more. So the first one is I brought a certain amount of hubris to how easy it would be to get a specification
Yes.
developed with buyers.
Yes.
The second thing is we learned a lot about the financial reporting and audit implications
Hmm.
of these transactions,
Hmm.
and that's why we partnered with Baker Tilly, and we're partnering with Baker Tilly to help solve these things. But that was not our original plan, right?
Right.
Um,
Right.
live and learn, right? So we
Yeah.
figured that out. I think the third thing that we learned was, even though I mean, just a few minutes ago I offered to get on my pulpit about PRFAQ requirement
Yeah.
building, but early on, I think we thought, and this goes back to kind of the thought around specifications, that we need less product management in these startups.
Hmm.
That a lot of that would be coming from the buyers themselves, and
Hmm.
we've completely changed our point of view on that. So the leadership team of our kind of pro forma ideal startup is a CTO and a chief product officer, because we've got to have a single threaded owner of what it is we're building on our side, and hopefully that will foment a single threaded owner, or at least a single point of view on the other side.
Yeah.
Which, again, going into it with the hubris of Amazon, I figured, that'll take care of itself. And in
Right.
fact, you have to hire really, really smart people, which we have.
That's awesome. Well, that's great news to product leaders. And it makes sense. I mean, they've got one on the customer side, having one on your side, it makes sense. But I could see with your, I can't wait now more to look at the PRFAQs that made you think a little bit differently prior. It is good news for product leaders to be able to join. I love hearing that. I really wanted to thank you for your time, Ron, for your brilliancy in coming up
Oh,
with
thank you.
a model for people, and to just do things better. It behooves nobody for these failures. It causes a lot of stress on a lot of people. And what we need to do is tone down the stress in our work cultures, and that's something I do see at scale. So as I started this
Yes.
conversation in saying, I love to bring people to the conversation that are solving those work stressors. And so thank you for all the work you're
Oh,
doing.
you're wrong. Yeah.
And thanks everybody
Thank
for
you.
joining. You're welcome. It's great to get to know you and your team. And we'll do more of these conversations because we need to geek out on this PRFAQ. Because this is where everybody's getting even just standard employment agreements wrong, meaning how you manage people to show that their work is complete and whether or not they did a good job.
Mm,
And
right.
right, I mean, it's causing so much problem. So we're going to do this again, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Hope everybody has a wonderful rest of their day or evening. Take care, everybody.
Yeah. Thank you so much.